The 60 TP will just about always be good in the game no matter where it heads, so why don't we get right into it. So here we are, we're looking at the 60 TP versus the E100 versus the BZ75. And we can see right away that these are all, the three 150 mils at tier 10 out of heavy tanks, barring a few exceptions, but these are really the three main guys, strong turret armor, hold down type tanks with 150s. They all are going to play somewhat similarly. And we can see that the penetration figures are pretty similar to begin with, I will say. In terms of penetration, the 60 TP gets that full-blooded 250. The BZ75 gets a little better at 258, but it does fall off at range. You don't feel that too bad because you do have heat. That being said, the heat on this tank is not super good. Looking at the premium ammo on this thing, you're getting 317 millimeters of pen at 900 shell velocity, which isn't terrible, but certainly when you compare it to like everything else at the tier, especially at that caliber, you kind of fall off. 334 on the on the E100, that's not a small difference. And over here on the BZ75, we get 319. Not great there, but certainly they both lag behind the E100 when it counts, when you really need that extra penetration. Obviously, the the 60 TP and the E100 both have that full-blooded 750 alpha. The BZ75 is a little lacking in that area at 650, but it still performs super well at that. It's going to fire a little bit quicker, but the 650 does mean that the 60 TP does pace the group in DPM by a pretty good margin there. The reload time's nice at 18 seconds. You can get that to scale well with like a gun rammer, a well-skilled crew. A problem that you can run into is it does only take 30 rounds of ammo, but frankly, with an 18-second reload, you shouldn't really have an issue with that. The potential damage is huge with this tank, so it doesn't matter too bad. Now, onto the gun handling here, we see that the 60 TP kind of lags a little bit behind the class. The aim time is poor, the dispersion values are poor. The accuracy of the tank is good, however, so if you can stay in front of your enemies and aim for a substantial amount of time, which we'll see if the armor will allow you to do that, you can get, relatively accurate. 0.36 accuracy isn't too bad for a 150, actually. You can make that work at some distance. The turret traverse value is very good, but the tank traverse values are poor, especially moving. So we'll see, if that really comes into too much play. So, vertical stabilizer, smooth ride, all that stuff's in play here on this tank. In terms of mobility, I mean, this tank is super competitive in terms of something with a 150. Way faster, obviously, than the E100, but even in the BZ75, you're kind of burning that thing. Although he does have his rocket boosters, but, barring that, you're definitely faster than the pack. Your power to weight's very good, super competitive compared to everything else, and your ground resistances aren't bad. They're not quite as good as the E100, but they're not bad. This thing can totally shift. It'll get to its top speed very reliably, especially if you're going to take like a turbo or something. This tank will kind of move like a quicker heavy rather than, one of these kind of lumbering beasts here. Onto the armor, this is where this tank gets super competitive, especially if you're hull down. Looking at the values here, it doesn't exactly tell the whole story compared to the BZ75 and the E100. You could look at this and say, the E100 is kind of a monster, 270 millimeters of turret armor, 200 millimeters of hull armor. Same thing with the BZ75, 330 millimeters of turret armor. But that certainly doesn't tell the whole story. At tier 10, you have to keep in mind that just about everybody's very willing to shoot gold. It doesn't so much affect the BZ75 because of just how prominent the weak points are on the top of the tank. You can shoot at the top of this tank with just about anything at any distance and hit these weak points effectively. But especially with the E100, if you're talking about shooting gold at this tank, it totally makes a difference. Like here, you're saying to yourself, oh, that turret is fucking impenetrable, especially if he's using his 7 degrees of gun depression. Wow, that thing's super strong. And then you load gold, and all of a sudden it's made out of fucking paper. Like, this thing, especially if you're level with it, like, there's a reason why E100s will angle the whole tank at you. And it's because this turret is totally paper if you load heat and just shoot right at the cheek. If he's using his depression, you can go right at the turret ring or the lower plate, and you can see that this tank's just really not well armored. Like, at least with the BZ75, you have to like aim for a weak point here, right? Like there's a small target. The E100 is really, lacking in the armor department compared to this. Meanwhile, when we look at the 60 TP, you can see that the armor layout is pretty monstrous. You have this small weak point, which, while it looks larger in the live category. It's a pretty tough look from the visual category. You can see that it's a little larger than it appears, like in the actual hitbox, but like that's not a comfy shot for most tanks. You can see that the top plate on it is overmatchable. This is a 50 millimeter plate. Anything over 150 millimeters will overmatch that, but frankly, there's not that much running around at tier 10 with a 150 that's going to reliably hit that shot. So that being said, you have a 150 with phenomenal gun depression at 8 degrees and this like pan-shaped turret with a ricochet angle on the hull, and it's pretty monstrous if you can get it on a ridgeline. Even looking at like heat, against heat, this tank is like super effective. There's a small shot at the neck here that you can get if the 60 TPs hold down or into the commander's hatch, but you'll notice that like if a 60 TP has you hold down, he will take his shot at you and purposefully dip the gun to cover the neck. That's totally on purpose. He's trying to cover the weak point there. If you can do that, that's a super viable skill. 500 effective millimeters on the hull if you're using your turret armor. Everything other than this neck is totally impenetrable. Other than this very slim shot at the top of the gun mantlet. You can totally use this tank's armor, and that's part of the reason why it has a super effective win rate at tier 10. 49% at tier 10 is nothing to laugh at, especially with all these super powered reward tanks running around. The camouflage, none of these tanks have camo. It just is what it is, although, 6 and 7% isn't nothing compared to the E100 at 2.9. But, no camo really to speak of. 390 meters view range isn't super good, but it's not terrible. You can mend that if you want to run like a class with optics, but I don't know if you do. Everything else is pretty competitive, but looking at the tank, it's pretty good in most categories, and that means you can do some interesting stuff here. I'd certainly recommend, taking hit points here with this type of heavy tank to boost that durability, get it up to the 3,000 range. You're almost a mouse in this tank when you get the field mods up, and that's pretty incredible. It's great for the trading opportunities this tank can pull off with that 750 alpha damage. Probably also going to want to take a gun rammer here, I would imagine. A gun rammer here. And again, the dispersion factors aren't super good. I am thinking you're going to, maybe if you want to take the vertical stabilizers here in the firepower slot, that's probably smart, and go gun rammer over on that last spot. For me, hitting that shot's probably more important than the marginal amount of DPM you're going to get. In the field mods, I'd certainly recommend this all-terrain suspension. The terrain resistances are way more important than that traverse speed here. We'll see that even though you're actually losing quote-unquote tank traverse here, the effective traverse actually goes down substantially when you take the lightweight suspension versus the all-terrain suspension. So we're going to see that like the effective top speeds, the effective traverses go way up when you take the all-terrain suspension. Probably taking accuracy here, I would imagine. I think we're also going to certainly do view range here to get that 390 base up to more in the 400 range. That's super helpful. Here you're certainly going to want to take top speed. That really scales out well with this tank's speed level. And I'm going to imagine you're taking hit points here, frankly. Yeah, I mean, that's personal preference to me, man. I mean, the gun handling does get better here when you're taking the lightweight platform by like a decent margin. That 0.1 is not nothing to, scoff at. That will actually help. You could take that. That's personal preference. You want to do a little better trading, that 50 extra hit points, go ahead. 60, you're now more healthy than a stock mouse. The lightweight platform, if you're willing to trade off 60 HP to get a better gun handling, you can do that. I'm not going to blame you either way. This tank, you're looking at this and saying 3.16 seconds aim time, that's terrible, whatever. You got to realize that if you're running a premium consumable on this tank, which most people are at tier 10, like you're already knocking off a tenth of that aiming speed. And with the decent gun handling that you're going to have, especially if you're running Brothers in Arms, if you're running Smooth the Ride, if you're running Snapshot, you're not really going to feel that 2.96 seconds aim time. That'll work fine for you. But yeah, this tank really scales super well with equipment, and I can't imagine this is too far. Like, let's go over to like the skill L4TU index here and see what he. Yeah, skill runs basically the same thing here. I'm imagining this is the more wide open map version here. You're going to get extra view range, you're going to get extra accuracy for long range, maybe like on a Malinovka, Prokhorovka, you're going to run something like this perhaps. And just you're trying to get hull down here and just work the tank well. But I totally recommend it, so let's look at some gameplay and see who can make this thing work. So here we join AlexStan11 from the EU server on Pearl River. He's a very good player from the EU server. You know, a player that not only is very good, but has definitely improved over time. We can see that, you know, his overall WN8 is almost half what his last 1,000 battle WN8 is, and he's just like totally turned up his skill level in recent games. So props to you for that, AlexStan. You know, it is very possible to improve at this game rapidly, so I'm happy that he's so much, you know, more competent, so much more practical. Great game here from him on Pearl River. We see that he has a top tier matchup in his 60 TP, and he's going to go mid likely. In this tank you can go mid. You can also probably take the east flank here, go up north, use your gun depression and your alpha damage, but you can be subject to, you know, for example, he's up against the Super Conk, a Chieftain. It's going to be tough for him to make that work against those monsters on a hold down position here. Even though the 60 TP is good on a ridgeline, you know, it's not a Chieftain. It's not much is a Chieftain nowadays. So we're going to see him take mid here, and I think this is a good position for a tank like this. You can definitely get some early game damage, and it's a good way to, you know, set up a tank like this with a, you know, ricochet angle on the upper plate and a strong turret armor. So let's see what AlexStan does when he gets up here. He's got a 430U and a TNH. He's going to get a beautiful shot at the lower plate of the TNH here, but he does give up his lower plate. But it's a worthwhile trade for sure. He did double the damage he got in return, so now he's going to try and hide that lower plate here and peek up on the 430U with some AP loaded. And one of the things that I like about AlexStan is he isn't automatically going to the gold here. Even on a 430U, he does have, you know, 250 millimeters of penetration if he gets the lower plate. If he gets a decent shot on the side armor here, he can make that work, especially if he's pushing out with the CS59. And we see the Tiger II pokes out. AlexStan is going to basically shred that armor with no problem if the Tiger II pokes back out here. Doesn't look like he's going to. No, he's on full HP. I'm almost certain the Tiger II will poke back out at some point here. And all AlexStan has to do is wait and put a shot right into the front of the turret. His teammate pokes out, so he gets a free shot into the side and gets his first kill on the 430U here. Falling back for the next 20 seconds or so, I'm pretty sure AlexStan is using a rammer here with vertical stabilizers, although I can't tell you for certain. He's going to push up on the TNH here. Probably smart. He now knows he has a numbers advantage and put 676 damage into the side armor, ricocheting the shot from the Tiger II. And we can see just how effective that upper plate is of the 60 TP with that turret armor. The Tiger II, although with a stock gun, is totally just ineffective against him, firing standard rounds here. The TNH is almost certainly ineffective against the upper plate and the turret armor. Although he has, you know, been hammering that lower plate pretty effectively here, we can see from the shot that's through there. So now he has altitude on the Tiger II, and that's a pretty important thing in the 60 TP. If you can get above your opponents in this tank, you can really do some awesome things. That ricochet angle just gets that much stronger on the upper plate, and the turret armor is effectively impenetrable unless you're shooting high penetration heat into the neck of it, which is a tough shot to hit, frankly. Now the T-103 over there is looking pretty oblivious to AlexStan, although he gets spotted, and oh boy, 750 damage plus 82 fire damage to the T-103. Basically chunks off 2/3 of his hit points in one shot here. AlexStan's now sitting on 4k damage and using this altitude to its best here. He gets a side shot on the Ferdinand, and with 90 millimeters of HE pen, boy, can you do some brutal things. That's the side of a super heavy German tank destroyer. doing 900 damage out of a tier 10 tank here. And we can see that just as we expected, the T95, FV4201, and the Super Conqueror, the Chieftain and the Super Conqueror, have handled that flank super effectively. So Alex Stan's got his work cut out for him for sure here, although he hasn't fired any of his premium rounds yet, so it's looking like he's in position to do some good damage here. The Kanonen Jagdpanzer takes a shot at him, and man, what RNG luck here. I don't want to put it all on luck, but that was a clutch shot there into the Kanonen Jagdpanzer, and it just went right through. Beautiful HE round there, I believe, right, for 845 damage, and now the TNH TVZ51 is coming up, and Alex then has to turn around to deal with this. The Super Conk is one hit, which is very helpful for him, and the Chieftain seems to have other things on his mind for now, which is nice. So Alex Den's going to get a shot into the upper plate here. He could probably be doing a better job of hiding his lower plate on this tank here, but you know, definitely nothing that I would consider super pressing right now. That fuel tank is a problem, however, you're going to want to repair that pretty soon if you don't want to suffer a fire right now since you're not taking a extinguisher. Now, the standard B is going to push up, and with that autoloader he could shut down Alex Stan right now. But it's looking like he's hiding that lower plate on the tank. Very good out of him. And he's going to push up, take a shot into the standard B and fall back. We can see now that he has the altitude. He's really using that upper plate and the turret armor to its best. Bouncing 1500 damage so far, and he knows the standard B is on reload, so he's going to push out knowing that the Super Conk is pushing after his Progetto. That's a pretty safe play, although the Chieftain could catch you out doing something stupid like that. He loads an HE round because that would make the standard B one-hittable, and that's a super penetratable shot with 90mm of pen. Standard B is pretty much a paper tank, so you know that's a fair game plan. Now I would be thinking about loading gold and checking out over the TNH here. The 60 TP can lose penetration at distance, but in order to shoot over this debris here, you're going to need AP because your shot won't penetrate the concrete if you're firing heat. So let's see. Aims the shot fully, and the accuracy is one thing that this tank doesn't get enough credit for, is that the accuracy is pretty damn good for a gun that aims so slow and doesn't have very good penetration values. The actual dispersion of the gun, if you let it aim all the way, is pretty comfortable, especially for a 155. Yeah, I think this is a 152 or 155. For a full-blooded 750 alpha gun, the actual accuracy of the gun's super effective, and we can see now that the Chieftain has been shut down on the enemy team, which is super helpful for Alex Stan here. It's going to be tough. It would have been tough for him at least to go through that tank with the 300mm of pen that the heat offers on this. Now he gets a very comfortable side scrape on the Tiger 2. This is super easy for the 60 TP here. You're shooting down into his upper plate and his turret armor with 250mm of pen. You're going right through the Tiger 2 every time. He's going to push out, try and over-angle that front plate, but it's just not going to work against 250mm of pen. He had an overmatch angle on the top of the turret. He had an overmatch on the top, on the engine deck on the front of the Tiger 2. There's basically no angle that he couldn't have gone through there. There's now 3k HP remaining on the enemy team, and Alex Stan is going to miss the shot into the standard B. We're going to see if he can manage to cap out here, or if the ELC can manage to cap out while Alex Stan is putting on a Herculean effort here against the enemy team. We'll see that the enemy team drops the cap here. They're interested in the 305 remaining HP over the cap, and the standard B falls back, knowing that Alex Stan's going to be reloaded by the time he comes back. They pick the cap back up. I would assume the standard B probably said something like, "What are you doing? This guy's on 10k damage. You might want to cap right now." Probably a smart plan. They get all three tanks in the cap circle. 25 seconds left. And the ELC is pushing up right now. Interesting play out of the ELC. Not really sure what the thought process is there. You know, you've basically fed your boy some damage here. But you know, really not much more that Alex Stan can milk out of this game. He doesn't have the view range to make that work, so he's going to load the HE round here and see what he can do on the standard B with his remaining time on the clock. Probably a good side scrape here, or just push out on him. You got 3 seconds left on the clock, Alex Stan. Can you hit the 10k damage? Oh, 961 to get him to 10k, 25 damage and a loss, unfortunately. But God, this tank is such a monster if you can get it to elevated positions. I think you saw a good example of that here. Despite the defeat, Alex Dan, really good job here. 10k damage, 2000 block, 500 assisted on, 5 kills, didn't quite get the top gun. But God, this is, if this game doesn't exemplify what this tank's all about, I don't know what does. A lot of people aren't even going to take the shots at your turret or upper plate, and if they do, it's just almost auto ricochets. He exposed his lower plate a little more than you'd like to in this tank, but really good job at Alex Dan overall.